So one of the fundamental problems that people have when they're trying to understand dogs or animals in general is that they assume that their internal experience is somewhat like their own or anything like their own. And that's a major, major error because there's no other species on the planet that's really anything like us. And what I'm really referring to, at least with respect to dog training, is the entire debate, which is largely political. I think it has a lot to do with money. I think it has a lot to do with just, people kind of coalescing around some bullshit issue just because they're all fucking crazy and they need something to get wound up about. But, there's this whole controversy between positive reinforcement only trainers and then people who use traditional forms of like balanced obedience training, which involves corrective elements, often remote training collars, which has an electrical stimulation, and then prong collars, pinch collars, all that stuff, and they're all designed to mimic a mother's bite and whatever. So I obviously come from the school that incorporates obedience and correction into the training. And to me, this has always just been common sense. I think that, they don't have language. They're not like us. So we have to communicate with them differently. Doesn't mean you subjugate them, torture them, but you have to speak their language a little bit. But, a lot of people don't agree with that. That's just, to what extent that's a cultural development, I don't know. But in any event, it's a lot of it centers around this issue of pain. All right, so you're creating pain in the dog, discomfort in the dog, and that's supposedly, it's wrong from a moral perspective, a scientific perspective, and the other side, the positive only side, they love to talk about how scientific they are, but what they never do is they never ever talk about the brain systems in animals and how they differ from our own. And this is a very critical concept that people need to remember just generally with their dog, which is that your dog is nothing like you, and their pain is not our pain. It's entirely different because they're even a big guy like this, his brain is it's probably a little bit bigger than a lemon. The level of connectivity between primitive brain structures that are primarily associated with emotional processing, perception. There's not as much wiring between that and their cortex, and their cortex is much, much smaller. Okay, so there's a large body of evidence, by the way, that suggests that suffering occurs largely in the cortex. Okay, in the prefrontal cortex in particular. It's the most highly evolved brain structure, and what it does is it amplifies perception in a lot of ways. Okay, so in patients with chronic pain, there's an enormous amount of prefrontal activity. It's relative to other people. So there's a lot of evidence to suggest that suffering is essentially cognitive activity, and that pain is perceptual in nature. So dogs, they don't, first of all, process pain like we do because they don't have the same cognitive structures that we do. They're not going to suffer like we will over pain because they don't have that level of connectivity to the perceptual areas in the brain. And really what you have to understand with dogs and with animals in general is that what suffering is to them, it's a much more primitive kind of experience. It's related, I think, and Temple Grandin has written a lot about this, but I think it's mainly related to panic and fear. So you can correct a dog, and I always tell people, I'm like, look, you can correct a dog and just don't make it personal, and it'll be fine. Just even if you do it too hard, immediately let them know, we're cool. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. They calm down right away, okay? Unless you fucking injure them, which, you'd have to really, really, I think, intend to injure them if you're going to apply a correction and they get hurt. I don't know how you do that without meaning to. But if you do it too hard, you let them know, because what you're really trying to do is make them not afraid, not panic. Don't flip out. We're good, buddy. We're going to keep moving. And they're like, all right. Boom. And they're right back in the moment, okay? Because they can't juggle too many balls in their head at once. Whereas a human being is going to see intention behind that. And then you have a billion different tiny little micro thoughts associated with this pain perception. Now it's a thing. It's salient in the human mind. Okay? So all this stuff is very abstract, but you have to understand that their brains are radically different from ours. Okay? And they do not have a very large or very a highly interconnected cortex. Okay? I'm going to post a link under this video to a study by Grandin on this topic, and I want to reference one other thing too. I think it was in Animals Make Us Human by Temple Grandin, which is a really good book, and she references another book that you should read by this guy Antonio Damasio. The name of the book was Descartes' Error, and that was the book on neurology. And she references a part of Damasio's book where he talks about these patients. They have some weird thing going on, some neurological disorder where, like, anything that hits their face, it feels like they're getting stabbed in the face. So like a light breeze, and they just fall on the ground in just total crazy pain. They can't even walk down the street and function. So in extreme cases like that, they would perform an updated version of what's called a prefrontal leucotomy. It's similar to a lobotomy, except you're severing the connections between the prefrontal cortex and the rest of the structures in the brain, the perceptual areas and the emotional areas. And what he reported was pretty amazing in these patients. The guy he performed the operation on, the day before, obviously, the guy couldn't get out of bed. I mean, he was like, just going nuts in agony. And the next day, after the operation, he walked into the guy's room, and he was like, Dewey! Dewey, there's a lot of pain in store for you, buddy. So he walked into the guy's room, and he said, how are you feeling? Is your pain gone? And he goes, oh, no, it's still there. But it's okay now. It's not a big deal. Okay, so the brain had stopped marking the pain signaling as salient. It's a really amazing story. And the guy was just playing cards, like nothing happened. He still perceived the pain. Okay, the perceptual pathways weren't severed. They were still firing. But what happened was the cortex was no longer holding on to it. And we're like, okay, that's what goes on in our brains because we're so fucked. We just can't let shit go and over and over because we think and we reify. We make a thing out of abstractions, okay, which aren't even fucking real. Imagine what we do with pain signaling. It's just gasoline on a fire. So dogs don't do that. So if you don't induce panic or fear in a dog and you keep a pain stimulus within a certain range, you're not going to damage them. They get it. First of all, it's a very organic feeling to them, though. But that's a separate debate, whatever. The collars and stuff, they mimic the mother's bite, blah, blah, blah. But really, a mild pain stimulus, they're good with. They're good. Some dogs are maybe extremely physically sensitive, but even that's rare. But even those dogs, if you recalibrate it, you keep it moderate, okay, just a quick doop, it's over and done with in the moment, totally circumscribed. You let them know it's not personal, and you won't induce fear and panic, okay, and they'll be fine. Because they don't hold on to it. And this is a very intuitive concept for me. And when I read it, I was like, that's brilliant because I had observed it. I've experienced this a million times. I've seen it over and over and over again. That's why I don't have to debate these fucking crazy ideologues. The New Age Nazi positive only people. I know it's not a big deal because I see it every day. They're like, all right. Yeah, like, it would be counterproductive for me to be making them flip out all the time. We really wouldn't be achieving much, would we? You know? So, this is a deeply abstract issue, and I could go on and on about this. This is way too long already. But it's really something for me that's one of the most interesting topics. And I'd highly urge you to read the two books I referenced. Descartes' Error, which is on human neuroanatomy and neurocognition, and Temple Grandin's, was it Animals Make Us Human, I think? And I'll link the study too. So just remember, their pain is not like ours, okay? And their suffering it's much more primitive. Their version of suffering is primitive. It's fear-based, okay? Whereas with us, we have a cognitive form of suffering. We take a pain stimulus and we make it suffering. Whereas a dog, they can come home, Temple Grandin talked about this in the book, or a dog come home from a hysterectomy and would be bouncing around. And, she's like, if I came home from that operation, how many doctors tell people, after a major, horrible operation, when you go home, they got to tell the family, when he goes home, make sure, stop it, Dewey. Make sure he doesn't run around and jump on the bed because he's so exuberant, doesn't happen, And there's a reason for that, because we experience pain differently. Pain is cognitive, pain is perceptual, and suffering is cognitive. All right, now, Dewey, I'm going to induce panic in Dewey, because I fucking hate him. Oh, you fuck boy. All right, that's it.